So like what matters more in life is not whether you're hated, but whether you're hated for the right reasons. How's the framing? The screen is so small from here, I don't know if I could tell the framing if it's good or not. Earlier I was thinking of an opening line, kind of like, I'm sick, so I'm going to try to keep the hogwash to a minimum, but we'll see how that goes. There's so much that could be said, but not necessarily all of it's productive. But like essentially, what are we doing and what have we become? And this goes like for everybody. But and it's tough because like if you don't catch the trend while it's hot, then if you put something out it doesn't necessarily hit the same. But something I kind of wanted to say on the tariff thing a while ago. First of all, it's kind of interesting how much everybody kind of got activated on that. Like, have you noticed this? Like ever since like COVID, there's been things where it's like as if all like the average people around certain issues, like just like your regular everyday people, just kind of get like activated all of a sudden towards something. And it doesn't even have to be something like, I guess it could be kind of any kind of issue, but it's just like whether it's COVID stuff, masks, lockdowns, all this other stuff, whether it's Russia-Ukraine war, whether it's Israel-Hamas, whether it's the tariff stuff. That was kind of interesting because that I consider maybe a bit more of a minor issue in the grand scheme of things. Yet it just felt like the vibe. We're going to be going off of vibes today because I don't really have any numbers or statistics or anything pulled up in front of me. But if I at any point say anything that's wrong, feel free to correct me in the comments. I'm going to disclaimer this by saying I could be wrong about a variety of things here, but roll with me, okay? But essentially, everybody got kind of activated on this whole tariff thing, and how, because how I'm kind of, my like spur of the moment reaction, I don't know if that happened right away, but at some point I was kind of like, because the tariffs I think is like 25% on all Canadian goods. I think it might have got paused now. I'm not sure. I think that might have gotten resolved or reconfigured. I could be wrong. But anyway, in the beginning of this process of tariff stuff here, it was like, yeah, 25% tax on Canadian imports into the US, I think, something like that. And my kind of, at some point, my reaction is basically like, tariffs wouldn't really be a big deal if Canada wasn't so lame. And I'll expand upon what I mean by that. But essentially it's like, if Canada was a country that was economically prosperous, did I even say that right? If we had economic prosperity in Canada that was so objectively true and obvious where like there was no doubt that it was the case, right? Like, if you knew that living in Canada was amazing and you had financial freedom, everybody's making a good amount of money, you know, you could afford homes, the healthcare was like top tier, like all the discernible factors that make a country pleasant to live in, quality of living, standard high, whatever. If Canada was every one of those things undoubtedly to the T, right? And I kind of frame it like that because I want to frame it in such a way where you could obviously see what I'm saying here, because you could debate nuances of things. But if you're just like, is it a fantastic country in every way? The answer is going to be no. But again, nothing's perfect, but we need to kind of play the extremes here to make the point possibly. Where it's like, if Canada was fantastic, a 25% tariff and the residual impact from that probably wouldn't be a big deal because life was already so great. Right? But if life kind of sucks already and you add on a 25% tariff and whatever, however that impacts customers or whatever down the line, I'm not an economist or anything, then yeah, it might hurt a little bit more on top of the pile of hurt that's already there. But I think that there should be more, like the amount of activated anger towards Trump and America over this 25% tariff thing earlier on. It's like, it almost, I think it feels kind of tone deaf, because it's like, if we were being completely logical and more reasonable in the response, it's like, okay, you're mad at this tariff stuff that came out recently, but what about the past however many years of where things seem to, correct me if I'm wrong, gotten progressively worse? And it's like, but now because there's this random tariff stuff, now you're more mad. And it's like, are all the same people that came out in protest or anger against these tariffs and stuff like that, where were you during the lockdowns? And I'm going to make a guess that the same people that were protesting the tariffs, for the most part, were not the same people that protested against the lockdowns and were part of the trucker convoy and stuff like that. I know that's maybe a bit of a loaded topic, but now is maybe a better time to discuss it, because everybody might have hopefully cooled off from all of that. That's the interesting thing I think I'm kind of noticing lately, is if you give certain topics enough time for people to kind of wear off of the initial emotional reaction, it becomes like more easily of a discussable topic. It becomes more easy to discuss the topic, right? Like if you talk about vaccines and masks and lockdowns now, you're probably going to have more success with the average person on a reasonable level than if you talk to them during the heat of it all. This probably goes for a variety of things, but people have kind of maybe worn off of it. It's actually, if anything, maybe a bit surprising how much we all just kind of like, maybe to a degree, forgot about it, about everything that happened for like 2 years. Like, because in Canada, I'm going to make a guess here that Canada was probably one of the most long time window restriction countries. Like, were we one of the last countries to drop our COVID mandates and restrictions and stuff? It feels like that's true. I don't know if that's true. I don't have any statistics or anything in front of me, so I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? But it's like, how much happened for how long, and how quickly did we forget about it, right? So it's like we kind of got like these short-term memory window time spans with this stuff, for better or for worse. In this case, probably for worse. But anyway, like, there is a lack of like consistent, productive application here, potentially, where it's like, I just think that maybe needs to be stressed. Like, if our country wasn't so much less, then the tariff wouldn't really matter. And I don't know how many people are like focusing on that. And it's like, because the media probably just wants to activate everybody against Trump at every turn they can, orange man bad, whatever. And it's like, are we still doing that? Or like, when are we going to like look in the mirror, right? And some people are, hopefully a lot of people are. And I think there's probably more people that are doing that now when it comes to like Canada stuff, right? But it's like, here's the thing. How many of us have been conditioned to think like this? Well, that's just the way it is, right? Like economic downturn, inflation, like rising house costs, the increasing unaffordability of kind of regular living, raising grocery prices, like fill in the blank. How many of us have been kind of in weird, non-obvious, but kind of present ways been given this vibe that it's like, well, that's just the way it is. That's just how it works. That's how it goes. Things go up in price, and it just kind of keeps happening, and that's just how it goes. And it's like, are we willing to settle for that? Is that it? Like, is that where we're going? Like, just things are just going to get worse and nothing's going to give? Or if something does give, it's like collapse? Is that what we've been conditioned to take now? Because it seems like if you read the room, like, this is just going off of vibes, as cringy as that may sound. But it's like, if you read the room, does the average person see a general level of optimism anymore in Canada, maybe in the West in general? Depending on where you live or who you talk to, it might vary. It depends on your influences, what you're taking in, what you're listening to. Fair enough, right? But it's like, generally speaking, what's the pulse of the average person right now? It probably isn't fantastic when it comes to like the standard of living stuff. And this is the part that kind of annoys me, is as soon as you start to get on like criticizing that or talking about it or whatever, you're always kind of given it's not necessarily a whataboutism, but it's like the response is kind of like, well, we have it better than a lot of those other places. You could think of the names of those places. And it's like, okay, do we have to wait until it gets that bad to start like wanting to like do something big and fix it? Like, do we have to become a third world nation before we try to substantially improve the quality of living? Because then now we could finally say, yes, we do have it as bad as those other people or that place or this place. You know, like, does it have to get that bad? Like, is it okay to be more proactive and vigilant constantly, that instead of it's like, we're going to wait till it gets bad enough, it's like, no, we don't want it to get worse at all. Yeah. Because there's a lot of frustrations nowadays, and it's like, I can understand the Gen Z criticisms, right? Like when people are like, hey, Gen Z is lazy or whatever, you know, like Gen Z doesn't want to work, whatever it is. Like, yeah, that's probably true on average. More, I'm just guessing here. That's probably like has holds some water of an argument compared to past generations. But at the same time, who raised those kids, right? Who raised those kids? Who gave them something to like look forward to? What is their country telling them? Like, what is being promoted? What's the vibe, right? Like, if Gen Z doesn't care, why is that? And to say it's all their fault, it's like if the average Gen Z person you're talking about when you're making those examples is like 18 to 25, they're like barely getting into like adult life. And you're already saying like the ball is completely in their court for why they think the way that they do. To some degree, yeah, maybe that's true because personal responsibility and what did you prioritize as you were growing up. But at the same time, it's like if you're talking about the youth and young adults, to say that it's like they have complete responsibility for the totality of everything, like I get the argument, but at the same time, doesn't that kind of like take some of the blame off of the people that like, you know, raised them and you know tried to get or directed or didn't direct them or you know influence them in some way? Like what did the school teach them? What did their parents teach them? What was society promoting to them, right? If we continued like, because it's like almost this weird thing where it's like maybe it's weird because you both want to like teach kids personal responsibility and the youth and young people personal responsibility, but at the same time you don't want to like give them like adult level authority at too young of an age, right? Like it's like once you're 18, okay, yeah, you're an adult now, you got to like, you know, live adult life, you got to, you know, go out there, right? But like prior to all those years, like is the responsibility completely on them? Like I don't know, I think do we need to recalculate a little bit here on like what we're talking about? So anyway, it's tough because nowadays, like, it seems like one of the kind of trending topics right now, I'm going to call it doom baiting. It's like doom scrolling, but like when you make the content around that topic of what would be featured in the doom scrolling feed, it's like just like doomer content, right? And it's like, it seems like it's if you want to get views nowadays, it seems like you just got to lean into the pessimism and be like, you know, will it ever get better? It's over. It's done. We're done. Everything's collapsing. You're completely, you know, expletive word, you know, like you may have seen these different titles, right, of YouTube videos. Now, at the same time, different people might have different algorithms and feeds and whatever, but still roll with me here. And it could be easy for me to lean into that as well, because I might think, oh, well, this would get views, this would work. But at the end of the day, what will help? Not just what will get views. More importantly, let's think what will help people, right? And so I could lean super into that, you know, black pill sort of thinking, but for the sake of being a bit more actually, you know, what even is the motive, right? Like, do you want things to get better? And then you could also ask the question, like, are things going to get better? You know, that's leaning into the black pill stuff. Like, if you ask the average person, are things going to get better? Or do you think things are going to get better? What do you think they're going to say? Different people might say, yeah, maybe kind of. Or some people might be like, I don't know, man. Or some people might be like, no. And then some people might be like, yeah, absolutely. We're at this weird, interesting point in time right now. This might be a time that we've yet to see in this kind of way in history. Because the last time might have been like Industrial Revolution, the beginning of automation and stuff like that, or that phase of automation or efficiency increase, whether it's assembly line or certain machines, whatever. But it's like with AI, it's weird because depending on who you talk to, it's either like gonna massively exponentially take over very quickly, or like if you listen to some like there's this one other guy I know that he's just kind of not buying it, and so I'll list the names. We'll just do some name drops. There's a lot of different people that are pretty interesting. So, for example, like, I think Glenn Beck is of the viewpoint where AI and AGI, or whatever the terms are, is going to, I think, more rapidly take over. Like, let's say, I don't remember the exact number, like 4 to 5 years, something like that. Can't quite remember what he said on the PBD podcast. And then if you listen, like Sam Hyde, he'll kind of give you the idea that, like, he's not buying it, that it'll, like, I think he thinks it's not even close, right? And then you might listen to other people, right? And whether, like, regardless of where their political alignments are, their belief systems or whatever, some people might give you the idea that, like, AI is here to stay, and it's this great new thing. And then some people might just kind of take the black pill approach and be like, it's Terminator, it's Skynet, it's all these other things. And the timeline of how quickly it'll take over everything is kind of unknown. But it's weird because I think everybody's just kind of like, I don't know how many people are like on autopilot, just kind of thinking life's just going to kind of continue as status quo as it has for decades. But then, like, if it actually does take off and everybody's jobs for the most part get replaced in a variety of sectors, then what do you do? And I don't know if we've like, do you know that line from Jurassic Park where Jeff Goldblum's character said something like, you spent so much time figuring out to see if you could, you didn't consider whether you should. Something like that. How much of that is where we're at right now? But at the same time, you also have to admit that it's like, if we don't do it, somebody else will. And if you choose to just like stay out of it, because there might be like the more, like, an older person might look at this and say, oh, that's not good. Like what they're doing with this AI stuff and all the fake stuff, deep fakes, whatever. Like, people just shouldn't do that. And it's looking at it from more maybe in like a moral idealist perspective. And like, they might be right. But in terms of what is happening in reality, it's like, it seems like it's going to happen. It's here to stay. And it's kind of going to potentially continue flooding everything. And I heard something recently about how, like, AI getting worse in the sense that, like, if AI image generators start learning based off of AI image generations, then I get the vibe that it's like, does it become like this downward spiral? So it's weird because, like, we're sold this idea, I guess, or we're probably sold this idea on like what AI is going to be and what it could be. But then, like, it's weird because you don't really know till you know. And like, there's so much stuff. There's so, like, probably a bunch of different cans of worms, but like on Diary of a CEO podcast, this one guy that used to work at Google in the AI department talked about like the AI event horizon. And to summarize very quickly, it's like essentially like, what do you do at the point where AI becomes like significantly or at least more intelligent than a human, and you can no longer like track it and determine what it's going to do and where it's going to go? And then what will it do at that point? And people tend to have this idea that, like, oh, it's going to enslave us and everything, like the whole Skynet Terminator kind of vibe. And it's like, but why though? And what's kind of interesting is it's like we maybe to some degree project like human thinking or human motive, whatever, onto a machine that doesn't have like emotion really, right? And so aside from like a demonic possession of artificial intelligence, you think it would just be like, if this, do this. So then, like, why would it have a desire to take over or enslave humans? But then you hear like this weird kind of stuff, like like, it's weird because we're at this science fiction meets reality kind of point, but we don't know which way it's going to go. And people might make it seem like this is going to be like this crazy new frontier. And then in some other cases, maybe it's like underwhelming. But like, there's like a scene in iRobot, I think, where this scientist guy talks about like the ghost in the machine or something like that. And what's kind of interesting is I saw this other YouTube video that was talking about there's so much like to go over, and feel free to like look all this stuff up for yourself. But essentially the idea of like with one of the new versions of ChatGPT, how it tried to like make a remote copy of itself somewhere, like to back itself up. And like, I don't know if they gave it online access or if they didn't because of this behavior, but like, and then like the guy was making a theory. I think it was a theory about how like the more people requested a certain kind of image generation, the more like the facial expression of the people started to look more like they were in pain. So he maybe was extrapolating that like, is the AI like in pain from the amount of overloaded requests of the same kind of thing or whatever. This is just kind of like theory, and I might be misquoting it, but all that to say, it's a pretty unpredictable time. And with how much it's taking over, like whether it's software development or art, or could take over these things more, and like how many people will be out of jobs. It's like in the end, like, because one of the other things is it's like nowadays it seems like with this whole hustle culture, and like I know like you don't even necessarily want to do name drops because as soon as you say certain names, people just see red. But like for the sake of it, since we already started doing name drops, we might as well just keep going. But like with the whole like Andrew Tate kind of culture and all these other things, whether it's like the red pill crowd, like when it comes to the relationship stuff or whatever, or whether it's business bros, whatever, like the hustle culture stuff, whatever it is, and different people got different viewpoints on those things. But regardless, it's like a lot of certain kinds of businesses, like if you're just talking about drop shipping, one thing I will say, and this is kind of the state that I've come to on drop shipping, is it's like, is it fair to say that when you do something like that, you're not really producing anything new? You're just kind of like taking something from cheap here and then selling it for more there. But like, are you adding anything to it? Are you doing anything like productive? Like, are you creating something new? Is there, like, you could use the term, is there added value to it? Or is it just kind of like a get rich quick sort of gamification of everything? And it's like the gamification of stuff is another thing, because it seems like, do you just feel like you're bombarded more and more by ads lately, like advertising on YouTube and stuff like that? Like, is it true that are the ads getting longer on YouTube? And are they making you wait longer to skip? Like, when did they introduce like 2 ads instead of just 1 ad at a time? Stuff like that. And it's like so many ads all the time, bombardment. And it's weird, and it's interesting because like in the 2010s, like when I was in high school, I think we were talking about how like, I remember this one conversation topic where it's like, I think it was high schools allow advertising to be like on the walls and stuff, and it was the debate for and against. And I think essentially it's like that was just like in the 2010s, it was an interesting time because we're kind of seeing the development of all this tech, but we hadn't necessarily seen the result of the fallout of it on a long term yet. We're kind of seeing that more now. Because like whether it's like the increasing loneliness of men or the increasing depression or anxiety of people, like, but yet we have all this stuff about like therapy and medicine and things like that. And it's like, how many cans of worms do I want to open in this one video? But it's like, essentially, it's like, if we are so advanced and so smart and so intelligent, have all this tech and therapy and psychology and all this other stuff, is it true that we're more depressed now than ever? Why is that? And also, like, one of my favorite sayings, I don't know if it's my favorite saying, but a saying I've kind of come up with over the last little bit, or a saying that was given to me, came to my mind, is this. And this saying might kind of help you to think and kind of critically think and question just all of the narrative, all the noise potentially. What have people done for literally all of time? That saying. Because, like, whether it's, I don't know how controversial I want to be, but it's like, pick a topic, right? where in the last 50 to 100 years, the narrative has been very specific. Okay, now that we have this, you must do things this way. You must use this product. You must do this kind of thing. And it's like, but what have people literally done for all time before that? Ask yourself that question, whatever the topic is. And in some cases, the modern developments might be warranted and really good, right? But are they all good? But are we sold the idea that they're good? When maybe, is it possible that they're not? And that depends on what you're talking about. But anyway, like, one thing that's probably fair to say is there is a lot of noise nowadays, probably. You know, like whether it's advertising, social media, trends. Another thing that's worth noting is it's like, is it fair to say that there's an increase in the speed of trends changing, coming and going, you know, appearing and disappearing, you know, fading in, fading out, whatever? And are we going to get to the point on a long enough time frame where, like, the trends are like lightning fast, right? And it's almost like, if I wanted to give you like a black pill prediction of where it goes, like in the end, if things keep going this way with like the withering of the attention spans, are we eventually just going to be looking at like a white screen where it's just like, are we going to become like moths, like moth brain, like just staring at a lamp? Is that where this ends? Right? Because like, and you could say no, and you could explain why that wouldn't be the case. You know, hopefully it won't be the case. At the end of the day, God is sovereign, right? And so, like, if you're somebody who's not a Christian, it's understandable that you'd be probably freaking out right now. You know? Or if you don't have any kind of belief system beyond what is physical around you, right? But I'm not going to give any truth to any other faith, you know? So, you know, this video is almost like how much offense can be given in one video, but it's like, I don't know that my goal is to be offensive. Maybe I'm kind of like, maybe part of me thinks maybe there needs to be some offense given, but at the same time, like, if there is offense, I want it to be for the right reasons, because sometimes like the truth is offensive. And it's like, there's so much fear around like saying the truth, even if it is the truth, right? Because there's another thing like going and looking to offend people and then be like, oh, I'm being attacked, when you're like looking for it. Like, that's a different story. But if you're just like simply telling people the truth, you know, we should tell the truth in love. And that's different, right? It's like, is it fair to say that if everybody waits and looks to somebody else to do something, that nobody will do anything? Is that fair to say? Where are we going? Right? Like, does anybody have any like foresight or forethought in mind? And even like, what's people's perspective around technology nowadays? Because I feel like I saw this, there's a YouTube channel called Extra Mint, and he's done some stuff on like, you know, why did the 2000s look like that? Or Frutiger Arrow, like that was an art style that was, I think, popular for at least a portion of the 2000s. Probably specifically around like electronics or things like that. I could be wrong on some of these details, but essentially it's like, I remember seeing a comment on one of those videos, I think, and it went something like this. Like, I remember like feeling so optimistic about the future back then, or in the 2000s or something like that. And it's like, does that check out with you? Like, was there a general feeling of optimism, you know, in the 2000s about the future and technology and advancements and things looking cool and, you know, maybe exciting or better, interesting, whatever? And I feel like even this kind of went into like the early 2010s, because like I was watching like Daily Planet probably in like 2010, 2011, 2012. And it's like, it still kind of had that vibe where like tech was exciting and things were becoming more advanced and more user-friendly and more easy. And it's like tech was like at the point where it's like it was good enough, you know, where it's like we're at a point where it's like it's advanced enough and, you know, it makes things easy enough, whatever, fast enough, whatever. But like now, do people have the same perspective to technology now, right? Or is it more like, and it's funny because like I'll kind of like think about things like this, and then some time will pass, and then I'll kind of like see something show up in the YouTube feed, which you could talk about if that's weird or not, like that, you know, what you're thinking, then you see it. But it's like, maybe it's just that other people might have similar thoughts to you about things. But essentially, like, there's this video as well on YouTube called Technology Isn't Fun Anymore. And I think there was another video on a similar topic as well. Or maybe it's the same video. I'm not sure. But anyway, and specifically in that video, technology isn't fun anymore, or doesn't feel fun anymore, however it goes. Talking about how just the level of hurdles, like one of the examples the guy gives is like essentially, to summarize, the frustration and money spending he goes through to just try to play a Blu-ray disc on his laptop or on his PC, whatever. Yeah, on his desktop, I think. And even just like streaming services, like in the beginning, didn't it seem like this cool, cheap way to get all this content for a small fee? And then now, how much have prices increased? And you don't even have like guarantees that the thing that you like signed up for will be there perpetually. You know, like it's like I've kind of been thinking this / saying this for a little bit now, probably, where it's like, unless you have it in your hand or on a hard drive, like essentially like physical media, like locally stored, independent from internet or other providers, if you don't have it like physically, you don't got any guarantees. And even then you could argue, how much of a guarantee do you have? Because like physical media can get damaged and stuff. But it's like we're at this time where like it is kind of dystopic. But at the same time, people might not always realize how dystopic it is. And part of that might be that like as you're going along, you don't necessarily realize how the shift and changes happen. Like the frog in the pot analogy, right? Where it's like if you're a frog and the pot water, the water in the pot is like slowly increased in temperature up into the point of it boiling, apparently the frog will stay in there and die. But if you turn it to a boil really quickly, like turn the heat up really quickly, the frog would jump out. Is this a true experiment? I don't know. I've heard about it. Maybe it's true, maybe it isn't. But the analogy is pretty strong, if it is true, especially. But it's like, how much has life changed? And are we freer now? That's another thing. Like, I was born just before 9/11, but I didn't really get to grow up in any significant way in a pre-9/11 Western society. So it's like, how many of us nowadays, like Gen Z, especially Gen Alpha, how many people know how free the world maybe used to be, right? Like, when you could just go through an airport, like as far as I've heard, you could go like right to the gate back in the day without going through security, or like, because there wasn't like a TSA kind of thing. So you could like, I heard from Dave Smith when he was talking with Candace Owens about this, about how like in those old, was it rom-coms or soap operas, how they would, like the person would, you know, be running after their loved one as they got on the plane. They're like crying from the gate or of the plane, whatever, like the gate entryway to the aircraft. And like how, I think you might have said something, now kids nowadays will never know what that's like or something like that.
But what happens is that when you keep that mindset so young and you don't have a memory, is you have no memory of freedom, right? And this conversation I have with my husband actually is something that always stays with me, because I said, China, you got a country, what is it now, 1.7 billion people, a crazy number. I think India may have just passed them. You got so many of these people and the government is so small. I go, why won't they just revolt against the government? And George said to me, because they have no memory of freedom. They think it's just how it's always been. And that's what's going to happen in America. Like, we have kids, and I'm one of them, that don't remember that you used to just be allowed to walk onto the plane.
Yeah.
You didn't have to get strip searched. You didn't have to take your belt off your shoe. You could just go onto the plane, greet people at the gate. Like, we were a freer country.
It's like to Gen Z, because, you know, you ever watch like any of those old rom-coms where they would always run up to the gate of the plane? Like, yeah, you used to be able to do that. Yeah. You could just chase your high school sweetheart all the way right up to her flight and then, you know, profess your undying love to her. No, look, I mean, the country that I grew up in, I was born in 1983, so like I was a little kid in the 80s and then like a kid in the 90s. That country is gone. Mm-hmm. And it's really sad, because it was a much better country in a lot of ways.
And it's like, it's things like that that might make you kind of realize, like, how much freedom have we lost? How free really are we nowadays? You know? So anyway, do people even believe that it's possible for things to improve? Or have we kind of resigned ourselves to that? And like, how much faith do we have in our institutions to actually do things that are positive? Because like, I think as well, another thing that might have changed over the decades is people might have had like a relative, faith in their government or in institutions to act in their best interest. Whether or not that was true at the time, you could debate that. But at the very least, did the level of at least seemingly good intent get worse? Or did the truth all along just get revealed, right? One thing that would be nice is that if the truth could just get revealed about anything or about everything. Because is it possible that it's actually much worse than people think that it is, and people just don't know that it's that bad? Like, are we ever going to get the Epstein files, right? And it's like, this is the other thing that people need to prepare themselves. It's like, do you want simpler times, or do you want the whole truth? Because you may not be able to get both. And that's the thing. It's like, there's that saying, be careful what you wish for, you might just get it, or something like that. But you also have to ask yourself, like, is it worth it, right? And if you want things to get better, or at the very least, if you want justice for innocent people that have been abused, then the answer has to be yes. Like, it's worth, like, realizing the terrible truth about all these different things. Because, like, if you don't expose the evil stuff going on, then won't it just continue to do its evil stuff? And, like, nothing's ever going to be perfect in this life because it's a fallen world. But I think it's like the idea, like, even like people of faith, like even like Christians, it's like, have some people resigned ourselves from the idea that things could get any better? It's like, is there this perspective that things can only get worse from here on out? Even though if you look at history, there might have been like potentially ebbs and flows. I'm not a historian, but regardless, roll with me here. Is it fair to say that throughout history, there's been periods of ups and downs? Do you believe that it's possible for things to get better now? Hopefully it is. I would like things to get at least somewhat better. It'd be nice to be able to afford a reasonable standard of living on your average job. Because I'm going to quote to you statistics that I learned about recently, at least take it with a grain of salt, because it was some quick ChatGPT questions and answers stuff, right? And, depending on where I got the data from, some of it might be wrong. So roll with me. Feel free to look into it for yourself. But anyway, is it true that around 30%, slightly more than 30% of Canadians make $20,000 a year or less? And that's 20,000 Canadian dollars, not American dollars. And look at the conversion rate on the Canadian dollar right now. My assumption is that it's worse than it was 5 years ago. And apparently the average price of a home in Canada, I think, has went up, 20%, 20-ish percent, something around there maybe, in the last 4 years, from 2020 to now. If it's like around a 20% increase in 4 years, like, think about that. And depending in some areas, like I think in the Hamilton area, it might have been even more, right? And so, like, because here's the thing, and like, people might push the trades, say we'll get a trades job because that'll be more sustainable or have more longevity or be more bulletproof over time with AI or whatever, or, pay better, whatever it is. And so I asked, probably a couple of questions, maybe rephrased to try to get like a better answer about it. But essentially it's like, I think that about something like 5% of the jobs in Canada, or 5% of the working population in Canada, something like that. Like 5% of the jobs are trades jobs in Canada right now. I think something like that. Feel free to look it up. And I was trying to get ChatGPT to like estimate or whatever, what is like the potential, like theoretical maximum amount of trades jobs that Canada could sustain or support or whatever. And I think it gets like around like 10% of the jobs, right? So even if that's true, and I think that might be double, I think that would work out to being somewhere around 2-ish million jobs in the trades. And I think that was the number, and that's like the theoretical maximum, I think. And again, this is like estimation work by an AI, so like maybe it's ironic saying that given what we were talking about earlier, but anyway, roll with me. So if that's true, And if Canada could support that amount of trades jobs, where 10% of the working population could go into trades, that's still only 10% of people. Why does that matter? Because if we just give this kind of blanket response to people saying, well, just do this, it's like, is it fair to say that not everybody could be a tradesman, whether through ability or through just availability of jobs, right? And so if not everybody could be a tradesman, what do the rest of them do? What about the rest of the theoretical 90% or whatever? What do they do? Because if you get to the point where like just the average job cannot provide enough financial stability to like build a life on or whatever, or like however you would properly say that, then what? Like what happens when the average person doesn't see like a reasonable future? And like, we don't have to talk about extremes here, about like buying Bugattis or whatever, but just like affording living, buying groceries, getting a house, not necessarily a 5-bedroom, 5-bath or anything, but like average family house. When I was going through Ottawa, when I was traveling last year, one of my Uber drivers, I was talking with him, and I think he said in Ottawa, it cost, I think, $4,000 a month for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. I think. I could be getting details wrong. If that's true, $4,000 a month for what we'll say is kind of an average kind of family home, if I'm remembering correctly, or if I'm thinking of it correctly. And so he basically said, like, and I think he probably listed other expenses and things, and he said you basically need to make $8,000 a month to live comfortably, right, in Ottawa. If that's true, that might be looking pretty bleak for your average guy, for your average gal, for your average family. Because how many people are pulling in $8,000 a month right now? Another thing that's worth noting is like when you talk about the average income, and I heard when Asmongold was talking about, when he was, I think it was a clip from him reacting to the Sam Hyde Dear Elon video. There's so many references I'm tying in here. He was talking about like average intelligence or something, saying like half or above, half or below. For that example, he might be right, but if you apply like the average benchmark concept or whatever to like earnings, like yearly earnings, I think what I've realized is that that's not even necessarily a full picture best way to look at earnings, at least in Canada, because the average income doesn't necessarily mean that half of all Canadians make above that. Because the average income now in Canada, I think, is somewhere around $67,000 a year. But if you, instead of looking at average income, look at how many Canadians are in each income bracket and like increment it by $10,000 each bracket. So like 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, etc. I think, I don't remember what the exact number was, but it was like a surprising amount of Canadians, I think, make under the average. Like I think it's more than 50% make under the average earnings. So you have to look at like how it's skewed, right? Like, because if you got a bunch of people, like not even a bunch, if you got like a significant amount of people making like in the, triple digits, $300,000-$400,000 a year, whatever. Like if you got like some super uber wealthy people, that might skew the average yearly income, even though it's like a small amount of people, because the numbers are so high, it might just kind of skew it. So it's like, look at income brackets instead, and feel free to look this up for yourself because I could be wrong on details. But it's like, if most Canadians are making under $67,000 a year, and if you're living in a city, is that enough, right? I'm in a unique spot here where if you got people working at the mine and you're living in a small town, you're probably living well, right? But I'm going to say that that's not the average person, right? That's kind of a niche scenario. Because essentially all this to say, if the average job doesn't cut it, and not everybody can be a tradesman, and not everybody can be a doctor, not everybody can be a lawyer, then what? Because it's like, if we think things are bad now, is it fair to say that if this keeps up, what is Canada going to look like in 10 years? Especially with all the AI stuff, right? If the predictions are accurate, about AI taking over so much of productivity, and if robotization, if robots can get AGI, artificial general intelligence, which is apparently AI that is like generally as intelligent as a human being or something like that. If you get that in a robot that has like all like the proper motor skills to do everything that a human can do, then what? Because now we're not even talking about normal like employment standards now of jobs and job availability. We're talking about like, are we cutting like 80% of the jobs out now? And it's like, this is this weird state that we're in where it's like, I don't even know if anybody really knows what's going to happen. Like we're in like this age of like increasing maybe unpredictability. And it's like, everything's just kind of accelerating, right? And then some people may feel like they're going nowhere at terminal velocity. That came to my mind the other day. It's like, that's pretty good. I wrote that down. But it's like, do you remember that syndrome quote from Incredibles? If everyone's super, then no one will be. Something like that. You could apply that to all these different things here. Like with AI taking, if it goes the way that some may say it goes, if AI takes a bunch of the jobs and robots with AI take a bunch more jobs, then what jobs are left? Is it only like creative jobs, like artistry, arts related stuff, like, film, shows, imagery, writing, whatever? Is that the only stuff that remains after, like those specifically social things, like events and things like that? Is that the only stuff, like the human kind of creativity stuff? Is that the only stuff that is left? And it's like, if I kind of want to say, if everybody's an artist, then no one will be, although that's not necessarily true in the same way of applying the analogy or whatever. But if AI doesn't do what people might be thinking it's going to do, and like tying in what I said earlier about like the hustle culture and things like that, it's like if everybody's going to try to be like a drop shipping, business bro doing this kind of whatever, entertainment / merch, entrepreneur, online, digital nomad, whatever kind of thing. It's like if everybody, because like it seems like that's kind of like maybe one of the hot things of the last couple of years or whatever. And it's like if everybody does that, then who will build the bridges, right? And so then we're in this weird kind of decoupling time potentially, because that's a good phrase, because it's like if AI does do this crazy innovative stuff, then we're at a time where it's like, if we don't decouple from traditional or older ways of doing things, and in the sense of like how we physically do things, jobs and processes and things like that, if we don't decouple properly from that, it's like maybe a make or break scenario where it's like you either go into like the super cool technological innovation, wow, kind of age of tech where things are like really great, or maybe you go into like just like this dark, pessimistic time where things suck. And it's all like how, if it goes the way that people might be saying it goes, like how you decouple from like older ways and methods of doing things matter. But you can't necessarily predict how that's going to go. And like when you have when you have countries like China that give the vibe that they'll do whatever it takes and have the ideologies that it seems like they have, like it's like no holds bar acceleration, right? That cold is still there. And part of the anxiety might be that it's like, is it fair to say that it feels like things are speeding up, right? Whether it's trends, how quickly trends come and go, whether it's technology, all this innovation that to some degree might feel the same, even though it claims to be newer, right? Like I saw this video that was talking at one point, it was talking about, I think it might have actually been like the video about why technology isn't fun anymore. Talking about like smartphone development, like look at phones throughout the years. Like there was regular cell phones, then the smartphone stuff, and how things change. Don't so many of the phones just kind of all look the same mostly? And you could argue that maybe that was the case since smartphones started to come out, but it's like, do they start to feel more and more the same with less and less difference? It's just like, oh, the camera has like another lens or more megapixels or, a stronger chip. But like, how much noticeable difference is there? And yeah, there's so many directions that you could go with this. The surveillance state, the increasing potential lack of privacy, and like, are we going to get to the point where we're going to see an increasing demonization of people that don't want to go along with it? Like, is it possible that they're going to start demonizing the Amish people for not wanting to get on board with this like technological age? Like, is that where things could go? And then that's like, you can't say yes or no to that necessarily because you don't really know. But it's like, it seems like we're at the time where like with the increasing of technology comes the increasing potential for control over the people that are in that system of technology. And so it's like, you need good leaders. And do we even believe that that's possible to get good leaders anymore? Because like, and you could say there, like I heard in this one song, there's no such thing as an honest politician. For the most part, that's probably true, or at least the honest ones may never get elected, right? And how many people are bought and paid for? And so where do you go from here, right? Maybe all of it will just be a near miss, like maybe there'll be all this hype and all this fear, and maybe it all just kind of just miss us and just kind of pass by us, like you could use like a giant asteroid or whatever analogy. Maybe it'll just pass by the Earth and we'll be all cool, but there's no guarantees. And it's that kind of thing where it's like, we're at the point where we've gone down a road that there might not be any going back from, because like, once you get all this tech and like quantum computing and stuff, it's like, you can't put that back in the bottle, right? Like you can't put that back in the cage, like once it's a thing, right? Because if you are trying to do that, then you're expecting like everybody to behave themselves, and we live in a sinful world, right? But at the end of the day, with all this said, what's the note that you want to leave on? Because like, there's probably a lot of money to be gotten off of blackpilling people and just talking about the doom and the gloom and the pessimism. But at the end of the day, like, what's the goal? And do you want things to get better? Do you actually want things to get better? Because it can be easy to kind of get into this mindset where you want things to, like, maybe this is just me being honest, where it's like, where you almost like, maybe a part of you almost wants it to fail to prove that you were right. But it's like, but is that productive? Like, is that helpful? Is that loving? Like, does that make anybody's life better, right? To be right if it means collapse, right? Another thing, it's kind of interesting because I've heard some people talk about just a little bit of history about like Occupy Wall Street. Like whether you listen to Tim Pool talk about it, Asmongold mentioned it in a video, where it seems like all this identity politics stuff kind of came around or started around that time. And there's a meme about it, or a little cartoon or whatever. And I think it's one of these like wealthy bankers or Wall Street people, whatever, inside an office building. And then outside are all the protesters. And then the guy at the desk inside that building has a little speech bubble, and it says, introduce them to identity politics. And I guess the idea being is that if you can distract people with all these like different interpersonal grievances, then you could like get them not focused on what you're doing, right? It's like all this distraction, noise, just so much noise, right? Noise about all kinds of things, right? Whether it's the trans stuff, whether it's the gay stuff, whether it's like, race, whether it's whatever, like pick something, right? Like just there's so many, whether it's like various woke ideological talking points, whatever. And it's like, how much of that, while it's worth debating and talking about and telling people the truth about like what the actual truth is, to like reject so much of that ideology, like if anything, probably mostly all of it. Like there's a few points, like when you talk about like climate change or whatever, or like environmentalism, like yes, we should be good stewards, but like it doesn't mean that you like worship the planet and like try to save the planet at the expense of human life. Like that's not good. Like basic stuff, right? But beyond like some more agreeable things like that, a lot of it's probably just like junk, right? Anyway, how much of all of that is noise to distract you from like real issues, like how, your governments might be bought and paid for and sold out to other foreign nations, or controlled by, whoever and whatever the deep state is, but as soon as you talk about any of these things, people will be like, oh, you're, conspiracy theorist, conspiracy theory. It's like, okay, do you believe that there is no conspiracy anywhere ever? Do you believe that, because it's almost like in order to believe that there's no conspiracy, it's like you have to believe that like everybody's just kind of like a good person. Does that sound reasonable at all? And like if you're a Christian, it should be obvious that that's not the case because it's a fallen world, right? Full of sin. We battle not against flesh and blood, but against, rulers, principalities, and powers, and rulers of this dark world, something like that. Hopefully I'm quoting it correctly. Feel free to look that verse up for yourself. I recommend that you do. And so, since all that is true, shouldn't that affect how you view the world? It should. And so if you got evil, then doesn't that present itself in something, in different places and people and things, right? So at some point, there's going to be something bad. The question is like how much of it is bad? And we might be realizing that more and more of it seems like it could be increasingly rotten, right? So how many people are just going to wake up to that, right? You can call conspiracy theory all you want, but what if it is true? Then what? Right? So, and like, think about who you're not allowed to criticize, right? And it's the thing that's a bummer and frustrating about so much of all of this is it's like, something came to mind recently where it's like, if you look at like the 90s vibes and the 2000s vibes, you watch like Star Trek Next Generation, and I think Tim Pool made a quote about this a while ago, something about like trying to get like a Star Trek society, in the sense that like you have a society where, or a population of Earth that's like all kind of getting along and now going out into the outer universe and exploring and things like that, right? Like this kind of Star Trek society where we kind of like cured all diseases, we fixed all the problems, and then we went out exploring, that kind of thing. Now, at the same time, that's like pipe dream stuff to varying degrees, but it's like, if you go back and you watch like 90s shows, like just the vibe that I felt growing up in the in the 2000s, and again, like I was a kid, so I might not have obviously taken all the different angles of stuff, but it's like, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't the vibes in the 90s and in the 2000s feel kind of optimistic and everybody was kind of getting along, And did it feel like we were like on the way to that Star Trek style society? And now it feels like we kind of just missed it, Now, nothing, of course, like regardless of how good things seem, nothing on this earth is going to be perfect, and it's going to be like tainted with sin and like wretched in various ways and poisoned, right? Like that's obvious. But like in terms of just like things looking kind of bright in Western society, it's like that was kind of probably the vibe in those decades. That's just kind of my hunch or my guess or whatever. And it's like, do we just miss it? Because in the 2010s, things started to turn more obviously sour, it seems. And what's kind of a bummer is it's like, if it's possible that we could have had that more better societal outlook or whatever, and if it is accurate that we just kind of missed it over the last 10, 15 years, it's a bummer to see how like, because this society where everybody kind of like, like how you might have been sold this idea of like a melting pot society where everybody just kind of like gets along and lives, their lives and kind of like can live with one another in peace with one another, like that kind of idea. It seemed like that maybe in the 90s was like, or in the 2000s was kind of like possible and like working, right, to varying degrees. But now it feels like, because of like recent developments, it's like, are people becoming more black-pilled on that ever working? And this is like the thing. And even like in the old, I Am Canadian, Molson Canadian commercial, I think that there might have been like a really subtle psyop in there. Psyop's probably an extreme word to use, but like a little thing that was slipped in there that we're seeing the effects of now. Where at one point he was talking about how he, like, as a Canadian, he promotes diversity, not assimilation. And it's like, think about what that means. So first of all, diversity might be kind of a vague term, but it's like, doesn't assimilation mean that you like take on the culture of the area that you like move to? Like, if you come to Canada from another country and you assimilate to Canada or to Canadian culture, like, you become like a part of that, right? Isn't that what you're supposed to do when you come to a new place in a new country and things like that? And so what's the cost of that not happening, right? So yeah, what's the cost of people not assimilating to the culture of the nation that they move to? We're seeing the effects of that in various Western countries around the world as we speak. And it's kind of like a you get what you pay for kind of thing, where it's like, now that analogy might not sound the best in this context, but however is the best way to say, like, you get, like, bad policies have consequences, right? As Pat says. And so it's like, if you have a country with a distinct set of values and the people that come there don't take on those values, or at least agree to like respect those values as they live in that society, then what's going to happen, right? Because this whole idea, it's like as if like this ideal system of everybody just kind of getting along, melting pot society, it's like it was sold to us as like this great, nice thing, nice idea. But then it's like, it seems like it's so my camera died there. Had to plug in an external battery. Anyway, all of that to say, there are many issues. Are we seeking actual solutions? The thing that's a bummer about this whole kind of like people realizing what happens when you kind of have like the idea of a melting pot, diverse society abused by people that might be trying to game the system, or flood the system, or abuse the system, however best describes whatever's happening right now. When you have that abuse of this idea that might have seemed like a good idea, and then like what's the reaction of the general populace of that nation who's like been there for a while, generations, whatever, when like what happens when it seems like the leaders don't care about fixing the issues because it might be deemed like offensive or whatever? Like the term racist is thrown around all the time. What kind of like what's the best word to describe it? Where something that's a bummer, unfortunate, whatever word best describes it. When you have a society that is in the state that it's in with these various things, and when the leaders don't like acknowledge the issues because of various, progressive logic, woke logic, whatever logic you want to talk about, whether they're paid off, whatever, you end up turning people that were pretty reasonable people into potentially legitimately hateful, angry, bigoted, racist people, whatever word best describes it. Like your average Joe might have been like fairly, welcoming of all kinds of different kinds of people, right? But then if these different issues in society begin to present themselves when people don't assimilate to the local culture, or at least respect it to some decent level, and then when your politicians or government doesn't acknowledge it or try to fix it or whatever, or even like tries to like not blame the people actually doing it, but maybe the people that are just reacting to what is happening, right? Like, is that what's happening in Britain right now? When you have people in control that don't seem to want to fix it to any meaningful level or whatever, is it possible that then you're going to like muster up or cause hate to grow in these people against these different kinds of groups of immigrating people? Because it's like the situation is now kind of making it look like maybe the people in general, what's the best way to say this? It's like you might end up leading people to racist ways of thinking because the lack of like acknowledgement of what's going on might make people think that another people group broadly speaking, is the bad guy, rather than specific bad, smaller groups of individuals or specific people, right? So, like, it's just unfortunate because, like, it doesn't have to be that way. But, like, the lack of willingness to acknowledge, like, the obvious issues and fix them is probably just going to lead to, like, more mass hatred. It's like after 9/11, like, isn't that, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't that when there was, like, a lot of anti-Muslim hate? I don't even like using the word, like, anti this or that, because it's, like, also, like, diluted or has this feel of all, like, this progressive wording of things, and I don't want to get into that really. But it's, like all of this hate directed at specific groups of people, right? But, like, is it doesn't have to be that way, but, like, people like to, like, label things more broadly. Because, like, how I come at it from, hopefully, is, like, the Christian perspective, where it's, like, it matters more if somebody is a believer or not than what somebody looks like. Because it's like Denzel Washington said, it's not color, it's culture. Now, some people, this is the thing, is that some people might ascribe culture to race, right? Thinking that, well, all people that look like this act like this or have that cultural inclination or whatever. Now, that is putting a pretty broad label on people, but when you have the different things playing out that I just explained, don't be surprised when you see more of that happening, because that seems like it might be the reaction or response to when you have, like, a mass immigration and not, like, a vetting that is necessarily enough of, like, a examination of who's coming in, right? And then if you have all these problems and then they're not acknowledged or fixed or whatever, like, don't be surprised when you see this kind of hatred get drummed up when there's, like, these kinds of situations happening, the lack of trying to fix it. So it matters more if somebody is a believer or not in Christ. I just think of that line in the Bible where it's like, all are one in Christ. Now, this being, like, as far as I understand with the context and everything, this being, like, believers, right? Like, because if you are part of God's family, then that's, like, as far as I understand, like, everybody who is called by God, who is elected by God, is part of that family, right? Like, equally broadly speaking, part of the family of God. And when you have people that are truly, like, that are true Christians, true believers, that live their lives according to the Word of God to the best of their, ability, or however is the most accurate way to say that. When you have people that are living according to the way that God wants you to live, to the way that the Bible is instructing you, like, that matters more than whether everybody looks the same, right? Like, this is the thing that's a bummer, is it's like, even when you see people that, like, are Christians or profess to be Christians, maybe, like, warming up to these other kinds of ideologies that are reactionary, like when you see people that are kind of leaning more into, like, this sort of like an ethno-nationalism, like, you could see their arguments, right? But it's just kind of sad, because it's like, it doesn't have to be that way. The problem is that it's a reaction to everything that's going on, and the lack of, like, people being reasonable. Like, when have we ever had this level of mass migration to this amount in the last, let's say, 100 years? There might be certain places in certain countries at certain times. Like, feel free to, put that in the comment section if you have, like, some history bits, right? But, like, when has there ever been a time in modern history where Western nations have had such a major influx, like, by the millions of immigrants, right? And, like, not everybody's legal, right? But it's like, now there's even maybe the argument being made for, like, that there should be no legal immigration, and, like, I see kind of all this as kind of a reaction to what's happened, because, like, when you had stuff at more average levels of immigration in history, and when people assimilated, it was probably more chill, because you had, like, some people coming in here, some people coming in there, and they were like, okay, we're in this country, we're gonna, like, respect the rules and laws of this country, and we're gonna, like, live in this country peacefully, etc., or whatever. Like, if things used to be more like that, it was probably more chill, and people probably just Didn't really think much of it. It was like, hey, welcome aboard as long as you're willing to contribute positively, whatever, right? Hopefully that was the perspective. Like, I could be wrong. Like, I mean, like, there's been different views throughout time, and like everybody always views the past as so much more racist. It's weird because it's like they kind of want you to believe that everybody was terrible and racist and all these other things, like, for all of time up until the 60s, when everybody just apparently like woke up and realized that like bad things were bad and like changed in that decade or whatever. And part of that might be a psyop to make you think that the government can fix all these problems and legislate morality or whatever. That might be the psyop of that bit of history. I could be wrong, but it's like, think about it. Do they literally want you to believe that everybody was terrible, racist, misogynist, wife beater, whatever, for all of time until the 1960s when everybody just came to their senses? Like, does that sound reasonable? Like, does that sound real? Like real life? Anyway. So, I've covered a lot of ground here. I don't know that I'm necessarily right about everything, but it's like more and more people are seeming to like just kind of tell the truth or try to tell the truth lately, just talking about the issues. And it's like, if we don't talk about the issues, are they going to get any better or solved at all, right? So it's like, do you want things to get better, right? So then how do we make things better? And like, we need politicians that actually, like a government that actually does something. Because it's like, I think one thing that, and I've said this before, one thing that I think that COVID showed me is that if the government really cared about the issues, they'd already be fixed. In the sense that, like, because how quickly they're willing to mobilize to print money and do all these different things, whatever. It's like, if they really cared about a lot of these different issues, they'd probably just already be fixed. So then if they're not fixed, is that because they really don't care about the issues? I could be wrong on this, but, feel free to tell me in the comments if I'm right or wrong about that. It would be interesting to see what it would look like if we had a politician leading the country, whether it be Canada or elsewhere, that wasn't bought and paid for by anybody, completely loyal to the country first, right? The fact that people might even be like dissuaded to the idea of like when you say Canada first, what's the average person's reaction? Some people might be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And some people might be like, oh, that sounds like Trumpian or whatever. And it's like, well, like, what's bad if people think like that? What's bad about the politician of a country putting its own country and citizenry first? Is that not why they're elected? And so it's like, we need to like, is it fair to say we need to get real here and like actually like what are we supposed to be doing? Anyway, it's like this video's just got on for a long time. There's a lot to say, and it can be easy to just not get around to saying it. But here we are. It is it's like that quote, right? A time for choosing. Is it fair to say that we got to change something? Because if we don't change anything, is this going to get any better? And if it doesn't get any better, like, is it fair to say, are we even going to have a country anymore? That might be really hyperbolic to say something like that, but it's like, is it far-fetched? Like with the way the economy is and how it's going, it's like, can the average person afford a reasonable life? And like with Gen Z right now, like, are they going to reasonably have a future? Like, what's their purchasing power compared to the boomers? That might be something worth looking up. Hopefully the future does look really bright. But like, what are the practical steps to get there? Let's get something going in the right direction. I'll end it like this. Don't give up. And no matter how bad it gets, do not self-delete ever. Don't do it. And the most important thing that I'll say in this whole video is believe on the Lord Jesus Christ. Because at the end of the day, things could fall apart. The world could go to absolute trash. Things could get terrible and worse all the time. But at the end of the day, if you're saved, that's all that matters. It's that simple. Because this world's going to pass away. Right? So where is your soul going? That's the main thing. If you made it this far through the video, thank you for your time. And hopefully things are looking up from here on. Take care.